Good morning on this Sunday, April 10th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Lots of surprises just before sine die at the Georgia Capitol this week. Also, a new poll out in the governor's race could tell us whether former President Donald Trump's visit had an impact. And Republicans aren't the only ones battling it out in the primaries as we discuss the 13th congressional race, where Congressman David Scott is facing opposition. Melita and Phil are here. We welcome back Jason Carter, who's filling in for Theron, and Brian Robinson, who's filling in for Martha. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
It was an eventful final day of the 2022 legislative session, from a bill aimed at transgender student athletes to a tax cut and a change to voting laws. At the last minute, lawmakers passed a bill that would impact transgender kids who play school sports. They combined it with another measure that bans critical race theory. The move means the Georgia High School Association could have final say on whether trans kids can participate in school sports.
They had to do it that way, then maybe the legislation wasn't ready to pass. I think it was driven by politics, by the governor's campaign to be able to say that he passed something this session.
Basically adopted the NCAA model by kicking it over to the GHSA. And we're going to let them make those determinations.
Lawmakers also approved a change to the state income tax, moving it from a progressive one to a flat tax. The move will bring in $1 billion less to state coffers. Critics say the changes benefit the rich much more than the poor and middle class.
It's going to save Georgians a lot of money. It'll make us more competitive as a state. So I'm very happy. That's the third time we've cut taxes here.
Let's not militarize our election system. Giving power to the GBI will not restore confidence, and in fact, it may cause intimidation.
And that was B. Wynn referring to the change in the voting bill. You know, some major bills did not get the final okay, including an overhaul of the medical marijuana bill that would make it easier for parents and patients to get the oil in Georgia, and a gambling bill died once again. So let's start possibly with the surprise of the night, and we'll start with Brian and we'll run the table on this. The transgender sports bill, Brian, does this help Governor Kemp out on the campaign trail?
Lori, I think this is one of those issues that really fires up voters. And for Republicans, most voters are on their side on this. And the problem for Democrats is that it cuts across their coalition. You know, many of their black and brown Democrats in their coalition agree with the Republicans that transgender girls should not be competing in girls' sports. And so there's a huge majority of Georgians who are in favor of this. And so you had Will Wade in the state house whose bill it was attached to. You had Butch Miller in the Senate who was pushing it. These are great campaign issues for them, and they're very much going to be very popular.
Jason, Brian says this will fire up Republicans. Will this also fire up Democrats?
I mean, I think maybe, but really, to me, you're talking about an issue that affects virtually nobody in reality, but it does pick out and pick on a particular group of people who don't need to get picked on anymore. I think that one of the things that I think is crazy about it is this is the issue that people chose to deal with. You know, we've got so many pressing things. We've got hundreds of thousands of people that don't have health care, but who would if we expanded Medicaid. We've got all of these other issues, and what Republicans want to do, bend over backwards on sine die to go deal with the bill that's a solution in search of a problem.
Phil, solution in search of a problem.
There is a problem, and you just aren't seeing it. And the key word here is fairness. This is what we're trying to do with this bill. And so I think it's a reasonable bill. I agree with Brian. As a campaign issue, this is not a Republican issue. This is a common sense issue. And some Democrats can't even define the word woman. That's crazy. This radicalism is going to bite the Democrats in the November elections.
Melita, I'll let you to respond to Phil, but also how will Stacey Abrams use this issue, or will she?
I'm not sure whether she will, but Phil, the other thing is that Republicans couldn't define how many students are actually an issue on transgender sports in the state of Georgia, whereas we had 22,000 people who needed to be helped with a medical marijuana bill they didn't address. But the other thing about this bill is that you kicked the can to the Georgia High Schools Association, and the legislature's had a testy relationship with that group going back to 2000 when Speaker Murphy wanted to disband them because his daughter's debate team didn't like competing against private schools in Atlanta. So they kicked the can to a different lane and delayed dealing with the issue, but it gives them something to run on.
what about that point? The Georgia High School Association hasn't had the best relationship with legislators. Are they kicking the can to them?
To some degree, but what we've seen with the legislature time and time again is that they will do something to address an immediate need, and then they'll come back and readdress it in the next session or two. I think this is something that's not going away because it's something where Democrats like Jason and Melita are going to lay down on it, and that's going to give Republicans something to post up on an issue where the majority of voters are with them. Of course, we should have different classifications. I wish there was a classification for middle-aged, pudgy guys who are below 6 feet. That would be super fair. We need more fairness.
All right, we'll stop there because I do want to talk about some of these other issues. And Jason, you were a state senator, ran for governor. What do you think about this tax cut?
I think that one of the things that I believe is that in Georgia, you end up cutting the wrong government, right? Georgia already collects fewer taxes than any other state per capita. I think tax cuts are great. I just think that they should be happening at the federal level because right now you've got a state that's not really doing all that it needs to do to address transportation. We're not getting the things done that we need to get done. Everybody's for a tax cut. I never voted for a tax increase, obviously in my entire life during the Georgia legislature. But I do think that when we focus on it here, we lose track of where we should be dealing with it, which is at the federal level.
Phil?
I like the phase-in where we're cutting the taxes and have a flat tax, but I'm in favor of just getting rid of the state income tax. I mean, if Tennessee can do it, we can do it. Florida, of course, doesn't have it. Texas and other states. It does take a phase down, but I think that's helping, like a David Perdue in the GOP gubernatorial primary. That's one of his biggest applause lines, is to get rid of the state income tax, and some other candidates too.
Phil, I want to go right back to you real quick because this was supposed to be the year, and I say this every year, and it's why I don't talk about the issue really much on the Georgia gang. Gaming, gambling, whatever you want to call it, died yet again.
It died by one vote, especially with sports betting. I read what the CEO of the Atlanta Braves said, Derek Schiller, that I think people are illegally sports betting right here in this state, and that's terrible. I think that it died by one vote. They should have had their act together. We thought they might have, but it's a sad story.
Melita, let's talk about the change that will allow the GBI to investigate allegations of voter fraud. Why are Democrats so opposed to this?
Well, I think they're worried about the specter of militarizing and over-investigating the vote as a way of suppressing votes in the end. But I think, the whole voter issue was over-debated in prior years, and so, there's nothing you can do about it at this point.
Brian?
This is one of those things whose time has come. And I agree with what Derek Schiller said. This is already happening. What we need is a way to recoup some of this revenue.
Oh, we were talking about voting. But the voting law.
Oh, I'm sorry. I want to talk about betting.
Go ahead and then get to voting.
Yes.
He's the only Republican that'd rather talk about betting than voting laws. That is for sure.
Yeah, I want to bet on voting. Wait, so what we've done here is actually a fairly mild, minimal change. It allows the GBI to do the original investigation. I think that this is something that most people could get behind. We trust the GBI. They're an organization that has a lot of faith amongst the electorate. So I think it's a great change, and it's another thing that's a notch on Kemp's belt going into the primary.
I got lots of hands raising. Is this a minor change?
The problem is this: everything's a notch on the belt. Nothing is actually addressing a need, right? There's no need for this. We investigate. Just last week, Phil was talking about how well they investigate voter fraud and what they do in Fulton County and all the other things. And now we keep doing things for no reason. And I think when you have a legislature that's only acting on politics, you got a real problem.
Well, I got a reason for Jason. Just this past Thursday, Judge Robert McBurney, a Superior Court judge, he's no Trump judge, he's no conservative, but he ordered Richard Barron and the Fulton County election system to have an extra layer of security. Now, we're not militarizing anything. This is a judge that knows Fulton County like those of us who have looked at the mismanagement and fraud in Fulton County. He's ordering an extra layer of security. He doesn't trust the Fulton County Elections Board.
No,
and so the GBI, we certainly would need the GBI.
What you just said that it's working now. This is all just so people can talk about it.
You said there was no problem. There is a problem.
But it's one that you say is getting solved already.
I don't know if it's being solved. Wait till the election is held.
Yeah, if your guy wins, you'll think it was fair.
No, just like Stacey Abrams and the Democrats thought it was unfair.
Well, I was going to say that Brian mentioned we trust the GBI. The GBI did an investigation in Cobb County and found no fraud about absentee vote signatures. And yet, Republicans still continue to say that there's all this election fraud.
They investigated the wrong county.
Well, you trust the GBI until you don't like what they find.
All right, we'll leave it there, folks. Y'all are fired up today. All right, well, coming up, a new poll in the governor's race shows former President Trump may not have given David Perdue the boost he needs heading into the May primary. A new poll out this week by Emerson College and The Hill showed Governor Brian Kemp still with a double-digit lead over David Perdue. Phil, let's get your take on this. I mean, I thought what was really interesting, of the Republicans polled, 37% said the endorsement of Donald Trump would make them more likely to support Perdue. Does that number seem low to you?
You know, I think there's a flaw, and you've heard me say this before. I don't know why during a primary that these polling companies, and Insider Advantage doesn't do this, you should only do the likely primary voters. Half of these voters were just registered voters. Now, 2 million people who are registered don't even vote, and a lot of Republicans vote more in the general than in the primary. So I do think Governor Kemp has had a very good week with signing bills and getting great earned media. But I think this is good news also for his primary opponent, David Perdue, because this is there's been 3 polls already that shows the governor under 50%. He's under 50% in this poll. And so you can't be happy if you're a Kemp consultant with that. And I'm going to make a prediction too, and this is very interesting. There's 3 minor candidates in a Republican primary. They're getting probably 5 or 6%. I think that'll go down a little. But if they're getting 4 or 5% in the primary on May 24th, I think there could be a runoff.
Brian, to the other Republican here on the panel, could there be a runoff here?
I thought that was very possible just a few weeks ago. What has been interesting to me, Laurie, is that Kemp's numbers have held. You know, when the Trump rally came, when the ads started going up calling Brian Kemp a rhino and saying he's a liar and he didn't stand up for us, the theory was the numbers would flip. We haven't seen that happening. So they're firing their biggest shots at him and he's not wounded. He's holding. And if he can just maintain at this juncture, and as Phil said, he's had not only a good week, I would say he's had a good 3 months. He has a lot of momentum. I mean, he passed a lot of things, including constitutional carry, which he's going to be signing very soon, that are going to be very influential with Republican primary voters. So he's in a good spot. If the Trump bullet doesn't kill him, my question is, what is?
Jason, your observation in this Republican primary.
I think that you may witness the end of Donald Trump's ability to support candidates and get them elected. I mean, when Brian Kemp was running against Casey Cagle, the Trump endorsement changed the world, and Brian Kemp rocketed into the first place and became the governor. And what you're seeing now, May 24th, is maybe Donald Trump is done. And the question is, can the Republican Party survive with a leader that Donald Trump doesn't like? Because the rank and file, the establishment might cheer, but the rank and file is going to be abandoning them.
Of course, Melita is shaking her head vehemently, but I want to ask you this, because some Republicans are criticizing Stacey Abrams because of the wealth that she has amassed since her previous run. Her disclosures say she's worth more than $3 million compared to just over $100,000 4 years ago. Is that fair criticism?
Well, it's pretty unfair criticism when you have David Perdue worth $50 million and Kemp worth $8.5 million. So the net worth for both of them far exceeds hers. And she's worked pretty hard since she ran for governor last time, republishing several books, publishing several new books, making the New York Times bestseller list in more than one genre. And so you really can't criticize her hard work or her net worth when the Republicans have a greater net worth than she.
Phil.
I just want to kind of come back to Jason and Brian's analysis. A lot of the interesting strategy that's going on in the pro-Trump camp, Perdue and the other slate, whatever you want to call them, is they don't use right now the Atlanta TV market. They're doing cleverly, in their point of view, the other cities of the state, and they're doing cable. And that's Trump country when you get outside the 26 counties. We're not seeing the attack ads, and I would point out that there's still a lot of undecided, surprisingly, Republicans. This poll has 17%. That might be correct. So
yes.
there's a lot of swing left in the 3-4 weeks with television now kicking in.
I always say we're kind of in our metro area bubble. But let's talk about this. In the U.S. Senate race, Republican candidate Herschel Walker is focusing on the incumbent Raphael Warnock and will more than likely skip debates with his Republican colleagues. Brian, is this a smart strategy?
Yeah. He has nowhere to go but down. He's maintained fairly high leads in the polling that we've seen. One thing that is of interest, and this is going to have to be part of their calculation moving forward, is that this latest poll that we've been talking about has the lowest number that we've seen. Now, Phil was questioning the methodology. That's fine. I don't know. But if that's a trajectory, if there is a pattern of his numbers going down because people have concerns about answers that they thought were confusing, that kind of thing, they're going to have to go out there, perhaps, if those numbers continue to go down, and prove to voters that he can take on Raphael Warnock, he can go toe-to-toe with him on the issues and speak coherently and passionately and decisively on them.
Jason, let me ask you this, because we did see where kind of an empty podium may have hurt David Perdue, right, when he didn't want to debate Jon Ossoff for a second time. Could this hurt Herschel Walker in a Republican primary if there's an empty podium?
Honestly, I don't think an empty podium would serve him any worse than actually showing up, right? I don't know that he would do a good job, but I think that the reason people like him is because of his legacy, right? He's famous for being a great football player. I've got a signed Herschel Walker football that I like. I don't want him to be my senator. I don't think he's going to do well in these debates, and I think that it probably doesn't hurt him at all to stay out of it, because right now celebrity drives the Republican Party, and that's what's going to get you elected in the Republican primary. I don't think it'll serve him well in the general.
Phil.
Well, I think he has to debate in the general election, number one, and I interviewed him a couple weeks ago for Insider Advantage, and I didn't know what to expect, frankly, but I asked him some fairly detailed questions, and I wanted him to drill down on everything from Ukraine to the economy and crime, and he held his own, and he had some specifics. So I think that Raphael Warnock could be, if Walker's the nominee, I think Warnock, could have a fight on his hands.
Well, that'll be a debate to watch for sure. Melita.
Well, I think Herschel is almost in Teflon-coated cruise control, relying on the Heisman Trophy and the power of his personality, and certainly lowering his percentage from 57 to 70 should be worrying to his team. And I think the point that Gary Black's strategist said this week, that Herschel's biggest enemy is Herschel. It reminds me of the old Pogo cartoon, we have met the enemy and he is us.
Brian, real quick.
One thing that we're going to see is that there are 3 other candidates in this race, all of whom are legit guys who have experience. They're good on the stump. One of them has ads that have now gone up on Fox News, so more Georgians will know about them. Let's see if those 3 are able to raise their profile and get Herschel below 50.
We'll be watching. Thanks, guys. Well, coming up, Democrats looking to oust Congressman David Scott say it's time for a fresh face to represent the district. We'll discuss.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page. Watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Congressman David Scott has 3 Democratic challengers in the May 24th primary, among them former State Senator Vincent Fort and former South Fulton City Councilman Mark Baker. Melita, what will you be watching in this race?
Well, I will look forward to the debate between these 3, and particularly Vincent Fort and his fiery personality, where David Scott is more laid back and more moderate, and Vincent Fort will push the liberal agenda. So it will be something well worth watching.
Jason, to the other Democratic panelists.
No, I think Melita's right. I think what you'll see is a real fiery discussion, and Vincent is one of my, good friends from the Senate. You always know where he stands. He tells the truth about what he believes, and that's admirable. I think David and them have known each other for a long time too. So you'll be watching folks that know a lot about each other, that know a lot about the issues, and you'll see a real debate like the kind we have in the Democratic Party.
Phil, as journalists, we all know Senator Vincent Fort.
Well, we do, and Jason forgot to mention that he's basically a socialist, and it really shows the division in the Democratic Party in the state between these type of radicals. And yes, I do agree, David Scott is far more moderate. He's a bridge often up in D.C. between the 2 parties. He's chairman of the Ag Committee, and he's looked out for Georgia. He's compiled a pretty good record.
I think if Phil Ken endorses him, he will lose the primary.
All right, well, let's move on. The Wellstar Health System announced this week it will be shuttering its emergency room and hospital in East Point, instead converting it to an urgent care in a rehab center. Phil, does this give Stacey Abrams more ammunition to say a lack of Medicaid expansion is not only hurting rural Georgia, but also metro Atlanta?
Well, this has been her mantra from day one, Medicaid expansion, and we could debate that, and we have on the gang. I do think that Republicans are answering in some respects with some, you could say, baby steps, but still expanding the insurance for people that are low income. And the Republicans never get the credit in the mainstream media for that.
Melita, how big of an issue will this be?
Well, I'm not so sure that it will be a huge issue, because really talking about closing a hospital south of I-20 when Grady is just north of I-20, and there are other hospitals in the metro area that are far closer for anybody south of I-20 than those wide swaths of rural Georgia where you have to drive an hour to get to a hospital or 45 minutes to get to a hospital, and they're big counties without general practitioners. So rural Georgia is way more in a world of hurt than the area just south of I-20.
Brian, do you agree with that assessment?
You know, I'm a bit of an outlier in my party because I think that we should take this issue off the table, steal it from Stacey Abrams, have a special session this summer, and just pass it. We are leaving billions of dollars on the table that are our tax dollars we're sending elsewhere. Let's just do it and get this over with. It's going to happen eventually. Phil's right. Republicans do have a Medicaid expansion mini size that the Biden administration is stopping, but the underlying issue in that hospital was they don't have staff. We need 20 to 30,000 nurses in Georgia today. We don't have them. The university system, the technical college system have got to have a program to get these workforce development items in there.
Jason, to that point, I mean, what do you do if there's a staffing shortage? I mean, are we going to see this happening across Georgia then?
Well, I mean, look, the bottom line is we've been in a healthcare crisis for many years, in part because we are taking our tax dollars, to Brian's point, billions of them, and sending them to other states to save their hospitals, to build workforce in their other states, right? If there's a market for workforce, we can do it, but nobody's getting paid in some of these hospitals, which is why they're closing, right? I mean, like, you've got a real serious problem. I think Stacey's going to make a huge deal out of it, while the Republicans, as we talked about earlier, are dancing around cultural issues.
All right,
unless they take my idea.
Crime is a cultural issue. Crime is a huge issue.
Look, crime is a big issue, and what Brian Kemp signed this week is a criminal carry bill that says every single criminal in the state can, as a matter of right, carry a gun. That's not a good issue for them.
That is a complete myth. That is a complete myth.
That's what the bill says.
No, it doesn't, and that's the latest Democrat spin, and you can say that nobody's buying it. You don't care if people need to have guns for defense. And you know, you still have background checks when you have to buy a gun. You know that. What are you shaking?
You just
it's
watch
true.
Constitutional carry. What's it mean?
You can't take slingshots, bows and arrows, and fireworks into a state park, but now you can take an assault rifle.
Their assault rifles are banned in the state of Georgia. That's assault rifle. No, we're not even talking about an assault rifle.
I wanted to get to one more issue, but that just took precedence and we're out of time. So, coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned, everyone.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Before we run the table, I just want to wish my husband a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Bobby Talbert. He's a great guy, great husband. Melita, over to you.
Well, I have two winners this week. First, I'd like to say that Dean of the House, Calvin Smyre, gave a gracious, humble thank you speech to mark his farewell for the body. He's served for 48 years, and his mention of so many issues just demonstrated how he and several others who've retired leave a great void in the knowledge base at the General Assembly. My other winner is State Representative Bee Nguyen, who has just won the 2022 Gabrielle Giffords Rising Star Award from Emily's List, the National PAC for Women. It's a huge honor for her and for Georgia. Stacey Abrams won the honor 8 years ago when it first started. And my only loser will be the Congresswoman from the 14th who continues to embarrass this state with her low bar for appropriate behavior.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned Calvin Smyre because the Capitol will not be the same without him next year. Phil.
I think we all would make Calvin Smyre the winner, the dean. We always try to salute community folks that have done so much for their own community. Marietta lost a pillar of that community just this past week, Betty Hunter. She was the second longest serving city councilwoman there and did a lot for historical preservation and helping poor neighbors get out of the rut. And also, Senator Raphael Warnock is a loser. He got accused by his ex-wife of failing to pay his child support, and a judge in Fulton County has ordered both of them to go into mediation. That's going to be coming up in May. And he's this great advocate for children. My goodness, that's not helping him.
No debate in winners and losers. That's an issue we'll probably talk about. Jason?
So I'm not allowed to debate. My winner is this week's opening weekend baseball season. And what I think that means in politics is normal people don't pay attention to politics until the playoffs, right? And so we've got a long time. But before the All-Star break, Donald Trump will be done picking winners and losers in Georgia, because I think his influence on the Republican Party establishment is going to be gone, and it's going to leave a mess behind.
All right, Brian.
Georgia will have a big say in that, for sure. My winner is the taxpayers of Augusta, who get a 13th month of revenue this week. And that's being driven by another winner, Tiger Woods, who is making his comeback here in our state. And my loser is Dara Lindenbaum, who is Biden's nominee for the Federal Election Commission. She questioned the integrity of our 2018 governor's race, said the machines changed the votes, completely undermines the Democratic message that if you attack elections, you're undermining democracy. Change that nominee, President Biden.
We will leave it there. Thanks, everyone. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.